I think this must be my first live stream ever.
It's mine.
Hello, everyone, and welcome so very much to our live stream. We're so delighted to see you out there, out in the big wide world. Look who we have. More people than just the Santos lady. Very exciting stuff. We are thrilled to be hosting the wonderful Teah and Silke Wittig for this wonderful conversation talking all about imposter syndrome. Yay! So the great thing about live streams that you guys can participate inside the chat. So we are posting this up on the Network University Facebook page as well as our YouTube channel. So if you have any questions as we're talking about things today, please feel free to write those inside the chat and we'll be able to show those up on the actual screen and we'll get those answered for you. But I'm very good at starting off the conversation. So this is building off of a wonderful interview that we had with both Teah and Silke talking all about imposter syndrome. So I wanted to ask both of you, since we've done that podcast episode, was there any kind of feedback that kind of surprised you as far as how it really touched people, as far as like that resonates with me, that imposter syndrome, that's something I'm dealing with. So do either of you want to talk about some of the feedback that you may have heard back from that podcast episode?
Well, I think, I mean, I wasn't surprised to get the feedback. I think people don't want to talk about it because, again, it's a feeling of vulnerability that you have if you admit that you are suffering from imposter syndrome. I think kind of talking about it openly and even admitting that, we all have our issues with it, give other people permission to kind of say like, hey, me too. So it wasn't really surprising, but in fact, I was actually glad that people were kind of saying, hey, we're suffering it from it as well. And I think people were just glad that it's a true, it's a true effect. It's truly
Right.
something that people do have. So
Yeah, it's not just in their head.
no, it's not just in their head. Exactly. Well, it is, but it's not.
Right.
Not just in their own head.
Yeah.
There you go.
I was surprised by some of the people that came up and told me they really enjoyed it. That was a great topic for a podcast and that they really enjoyed learning more about it because some of the people I talked to originally, when I told them about it, they didn't really know the term. And so when I explained it a little bit, everybody's like, oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about there. But the feedback after wasn't, again, necessarily surprising, except that, I had quite a few people tell me that they really enjoyed it and it was very helpful for them. So.
And that actually leads us right to this. Hey, could we maybe do everyone a favor? And we can summarize what imposter syndrome actually is. So, Ms. Teah, do you want to take a shot at this?
Did you ask me?
Yes, please.
Okay, so imposter syndrome is just a term that's used when you're really in one of those situations where you're having some confidence issues and that you're asking yourself in the moment, even if you know the answer, you're asking yourself in the moment, wow, am I really qualified to be doing this? Should I really be out here doing this? And I'll hear people I know that are handlers, they'll maybe have their first NW3 trial students and they'll come back to me and they'll say, I don't think, I don't think I'm ready. I don't think I should be here. I must, and they don't know it's called imposter syndrome. So it's that feeling of when our self-image is lower, lack of confidence, and feeling like, why am I here? And I think most of us have experienced that at some time in our life. Like, I'm not really qualified to do this. And, the interesting thing is there are times where with imposter syndrome that I think is kind of interesting, and we can get into this more later. Sometimes I think imposter syndrome, when I look back on my own life and some of the jobs I've had that I wasn't at all well suited for, although I took them as a stepping stone to move on to another, like I was at a large utility in financial modeling. And so I was running all these big financial modelings and rewriting a modeling program for them. That's why they hired me. Two things that I didn't love doing. And I often felt like an imposter there because everybody else that worked in the group was really gung-ho. They were fighting over who could present to the board, who can do this and that. And I would sit back in the back and go, hey, I'll take whatever's left over, because I didn't really care. I wasn't really a numbers person. I understood them. I could do them, but it wasn't my cup of tea. And so sometimes in a way, I think it's the universe, or however you want to think about it, kind of tapping you on the shoulder and going, wait a minute, Are you sure this is where you want to put your career time? And as it turned out, that was an excellent stepping stone to another job that I really liked. So it was worth my time and grade to put 3 years of my life into this position. But, sometimes that's imposter syndrome. Sometimes it's just, wow, maybe I really shouldn't be here.
So building off of that a little bit, could that, when we're talking about in set work, could that also be something for people to keep in mind as far as if they find themselves, particularly with trialing, that they're feeling this a lot, that maybe it could mean they're going too fast, or maybe they're trying to do this in a certain organization that maybe just isn't meshing where they and their dogs are right now, because there are so many now. Are there things that people can look into that way, or is it more so about the self-confidence and the inability to take what happens and not process it in a way that could be helpful?
I would say yes and yes.
Okay.
So I do think, part of it is your own self-image, your lack of self-confidence, you're feeling, like a fraud, like you should not be there. But it's also, if you suffer from imposter, and I don't even like the word suffer from imposter syndrome, but if you have it, I think that can also encourage you to do more learning, right? Do more training, find some other instructors to work with, train yourself a little bit more, train your dog more. So imposter syndrome can actually be a catalyst to learn more and become a better handler or a better instructor or CO, or better, teammate to your dog. So in that case, if you feel you have this imposter syndrome, I think go and have a look. Why am I feeling this way? Are there real reasons for why I feel I should not be here or I should not be teaching? Because there may very well be some skills that you and your dog are lacking. However, if you look at yourself like, oh, I feel like a fraud, I shouldn't be here. But you analyze yourself and say like, look, I have all the skills. My dog has all the skills. Then it is really a self-image problem, a mental problem. And this is when mental management comes in really handy, because it really does build up your self-image.
Okay.
I think that's perfect, what Silke just said, what she said, because I do think that's true. I think you see both those things happening. Sometimes it's that you've done everything. You've got the skills, your dog has the skills, and it's just literally that you need to build your self-image. And when you do, you find yourself really progressing along a path where you're feeling much more comfortable, and you're usually more successful, so to speak, or there's a high probability that you will be more successful in what you're doing. And I do think we see that a lot in dog sports. I also think that the other is true, what Silke said. It's like a little message to yourself. Wow, I really need to do some more learning on this so that I feel totally comfortable when I get out here and do that. And with that said, in that situation, when we're applying it to something like scent work, I see that more often when people are rushing it, when they're really in a hurry, and perhaps haven't totally completed their foundational skills for that particular level. Like, a common one to see that is if people kind of smoothly, let's just use NACSW, not getting into all the different venues, but smoothly kind of just whiz through their NW1, whiz through their NW2. And then all of a sudden they're in NW3, and there are a lot more variables. It could be blank, there's additional hides, you don't know how many hides, you need to know when your dog is done. I mean, most people know what all the challenges are there. Then sometimes that's because people really maybe need to just take a little bit more time to work on those skills, both for themselves, a handler, and for their dog to build those skills.
Okay. And we have this really great question from the chat. Could another problem potentially also be that the goals that we're setting for ourselves are too high? So could you guys talk about that within the context of scent work?
Well, I'd say yes. Yes and yes. I think you can set unrealistic goals, because when you set goals, you need to take into consideration more than just what you're wanting in the moment. You need to really take that look at what are the obstacles in my life that are going to stand in the way of me actually achieving those goals. What are the enablers? What are the things that are going to really support me in being able to achieve those goals? Like if you don't have the time or the money, for instance, to travel some, at some point that's going to make it more difficult because there's only so many trials for most people in their local area, right? So that's a requirement. Or if you have, say, someone at home, maybe a mom or a dad that you're caring for, or an elderly dog, and you really can't travel, you have to take those things into consideration when you're setting your goals. So, we want our goals to be something we'll be stretching for, or exciting, we're passionate about, and yet we also have to always be realistic.
I'm going to put a bit of a plug in for Teah and Chuck Anders, because they have an amazing backwards from perfect goal setting program. And I've also gone through it, and it's absolutely marvelous, and it makes complete sense. So I'm sure, Teah, if people want to contact you about it, hopefully.
Sure.
It's great. It's really, really great. And like Teah said, I think the goals have to be attainable. And Teah already mentioned some obstacles, but it could even be your dog, right? I mean, maybe you have an 11-year-old pug with severe arthritis. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. So, and you've just passed your NW1, and you're like, hey, in 2 years, this dog should be a summit dog. I'm gonna work on that. Might not quite be attainable, right? So I think setting realistic goals, and not saying that you can't change your goals. I mean, you can adjust your goals as needed. And Teah also talks about that, the goals, when you write your goals, they're not written in stone. Sometimes something happens in your life, and then you have to adjust your goals, and that's something to consider. I do think we humans, we're such perfectionists, and we want to get up there really fast and not make any mistakes. And sometimes we forget that the journey to a goal is not linear, right? It doesn't go like this, and you see all these little cartoons, right? It goes like like this, and then eventually you reach your goal, and that's something that we have to remember. And we have a team member, right? We have the dog as well. So I think that's a big part that we need to consider. I think it's very different if you are in a human-only sport, not dog sport, a human-only sport, if you're an athlete, or if you actually, have a team, whether it's a dog or even another person there.
I think that's a really good thing to keep in mind, is that there's so many ways that this can kind of fall apart if we aren't careful, right? There's so many ways that this imposter syndrome can kind of rear its ugly head if we aren't aware of what's going on and the way that we're approaching things. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you was, what are you hearing as instructors from your clients who potentially are also competing at trial, with how they are coping with imposter syndrome? Or maybe after the podcast episode, like, oh yeah, that's what I have. That's what I go through. And what are some of the things that they're doing to better cope with it? Or how are they identifying how maybe they were struggling with it?
I think one of the things is acknowledging. They have to acknowledge that they have it, and then come up with a game plan how to combat it. I think one of the ways is you surround yourself with like-minded people, with positive people, supportive people who can build you up, who kind of are telling, hey, you are a great handler, you have a great dog. And I'm not saying that it should be lying to you and you're really not, not there yet, but who are really supportive and very positive. And I think that's the biggie, because a lot of it is we so pay attention to what other people are saying about us and our team, or what we think they're saying, and that I think having people that you can bounce ideas off of, or that maybe something didn't go so well, that they can build you up, I think is one of the most important things.
I do too. I think it takes a village. If you're really serious about wanting to progress in your dog sport, whatever it is, you really do need to surround yourself with the people who can support you. And one of those people is, what we like to call your accountability buddy. And that person is one to just help you stay accountable. That's the friend you pick, that when you put down on your goals, I'm going to go to class once a week and I'm going to practice 3 or 4 times a week, let's say, outside of class, that's the person that checks in with you and says, so how did your 4 practices go this week? And you have to, fess up, I either did it or I didn't. And so that's one person. You also have someone, like Silke said, ideally someone you can bounce ideas off of, that you could say, hey, I was thinking of this. I thought maybe this would be a creative way that I could travel a little bit, and get some ideas maybe from someone else. And then the positivity about the people who are around you has a huge impact. And I know that's one of the reasons I do mental management. I'm guessing part of for Silke too, because I would love to see everybody at a trial at their very top of their mental game, as well as their dog having the skills, because I really do believe that what you see more often are the handler mistakes. And it's natural to be nervous or to have a good day or a bad day. It happens. It's just that if you have some tools that help you, like I'm being honest here. I just did an L1C, right? And I'm an NW3 with Reacher. And, that should be like nothing. I shouldn't even think about it. In the past, looking back at a few trials, I had a few container issues. And so I really pulled myself aside. I got some help from some excellent instructors. Thank you, Silke. That's one of them. And, I talked to a couple of friends of mine that were good instructors. I got some ideas of some exercises to work, and I put the time in. And I knew that we were ready. And it's like when any, I think, instructor or person that's been at it long, like you're going out to do an ORT, you think, oh, I really ought to be able to do that. So in some ways, I created some nervousness about that, because like, I'm not going into elite where I can say, it's my first elite. Oh, well, it's like I'm going to an L1C. I really ought to be able to get the 4 searches. And, I had to do my mental management. I always do it anyway at any trial, but I needed to take that nervous energy and turn it into excitement. And I needed to do my visualization and really make myself feel good about it. So anybody can get nervous. Don't think that people that have been competing a while, or even Olympians, Lanny will tell you, they're nervous. They can get nervous. The difference is they know how to handle it.
So for people who may hear that and say, okay, but I am nervous to the point that I'm like debilitated. I'm no longer training. I'm no longer going to class. I can't even think about entering a trial. And then every time that I think about doing stuff, I have a litany of a list of, well, I'm terrible with my leash handling. Oh, I drop all those treats and I never can tell what my dog is doing. I can never really call alert. And then those people, the volunteers said, well, why didn't you call it? Why couldn't you see it? And everyone hates me. So how do you help those people?
So the question is, I think, why do we need to compete, right? I think there is a lot of pressure culturally, socially to compete, but I have absolutely no problem if my students do not want to compete. And I think, like you said, it's actually more detrimental potentially to the person, and the attitude that you are describing, that may actually easily spill over into the rest of your life, and that's not what you want. There are many reasons why people are not competing. It could be opportunity, it could be money, it might be taking care of somebody else. But sometimes it's like, if you're not enjoying it, you do not have to do it. If somebody says like, well, you must be a bad dog owner or dog handler because you're not competing, that is absolutely not true. And both Teah and I, we're both COs, we're both judges. We see very, very good teams, but we also see some teams where you're honestly asking yourself, why are you here, from multiple reasons. So if they don't want to compete, if they don't feel well. I mean, I know of a person who actually physically got sick before each trial. And I mean, that shouldn't be a life. That shouldn't be part of it. They can definitely try the mental management program, and I do think that would help them for sure, do a little bit, but taking a break from trialing, maybe working on your mental program, and then maybe in a year's time, try again, right?
Mhm.
There's also other options. You have sniff and goes, you have like mock trials that they can go and enjoy. So competition is not part of the requirements of canine nosework. And remember why we all started nosework in the first place, right? We wanted a fun game to play with our dogs. And that is something I think that we all sometimes need to remind ourselves and others, why are we doing it? And it is really because we want to do a fun activity with our dogs. And the competition potentially is icing on the cake, or the opposite for some people.
Yeah. And I think I totally agree with that. We are so on the same page on that. The other thing I think sometimes is that people, now on the other side of that, you've got someone who might actually have potential to do just fine. Their dog maybe is one of those naturally blessed dogs that are great at nose work, and there's no reason someone can't, learn to be a handler. So let's say someone really, really decided, gosh, I just really want to compete in this. Or sometimes you've got the situation of someone that is holding a position, such as a nosework instructor, that feels like, well, I've got to be out there. My students are out there. I have to do it too. And they have reasons, and yet they find that they're still struggling with the nerves and what to do about it. So, first I would say, yes, mental management would be my first go-to, because I happen to know it really works. It works really well. The other thing I would say for those people is two things you can do anytime that you're overwhelmed in your life, and it doesn't have to be about dog sports. It could be about a job or a relationship or anything else. The one thing you can do is always break things down into smaller steps and just kind of start slow, do a little bit, Yes, you would start with your classes, and then maybe you do start with some informal kinds of competition practices. Get out there in a sniff and go, see how you feel. If you're finally ready to step out into the competition, start with an L1C, start with something that's not, maybe a full day, and start to get your feet wet and see if you've developed some skills that can help you. Because one thing I really believe is that confidence is a skill. It's not a personality trait. There are personality traits that lend themselves to people perhaps being more confident because they're more outgoing. They speak to people more easily. Maybe some people are more introverted. They're not that comfortable. The fact is, little steps in courage in your daily life, something that occurs to you that you would like to do, and then you make up a bunch of reasons as to why you shouldn't do it and you can't do it. And, maybe it's calling an old friend that you haven't talked to in 5 years, somebody that you really liked and enjoyed, and you just grew separate. And you're thinking to yourself, well, I can't call them. It's been 5 years. Well, as a good friend of mine always said, put on your big girl pants, put on your big boy pants, get on there and do it and see what happens. What's the worst that can happen? And, you start doing a few little smaller, courageous things in your life. And as you step out of your comfort zone a little bit and do these things, then your mind starts to say to you, hey, I can trust you. You'll figure it out. You'll take care of things. Okay, it's kind of scary. Maybe I don't even want to do it, but I've decided I'm going to do it. So I'm going to step out there and by gosh, I'm going to give it a shot. And, as you do that, regardless of the outcome, if the friend says, well, I'm never going to talk to you again, you haven't called me for 5 years, or if you rekindle the relationship, either way, you know that you had the guts and the willingness to get out there and do it. And you start to kind of build that muscle of confidence in yourself. And then that starts to apply to all kinds of things in your life, not just your nose work, perhaps to other things like interviewing for a job or anything else. So you get started, you get going.
So building off of that a little bit, two different things I have questions for you is, if you find that you are retracting potentially in your nose work things, you're not going to class, you're not training as much, would you also see those kinds of reactions in other parts of your life? And then 4, could you potentially work on things in other parts of your life and potentially have that bleed over in a good way in nose work? That's question number 1. And then question number 2 is for people who are maybe going to class, how are they going to cope with the fact that if they are already suffering from this low self-esteem, low self-image, and they notice all their classmates are out there and doing brilliant during their searches during class, like, ooh, see how bad I am? I'm really not good at this. So you can tackle either one of those. Is there a way, just to recap, a way that potentially we can identify things that we're doing in life outside of nose work and say, ooh, that's really not helping me. Maybe if I work on that outside of nose work, it'll help me in nose work. And then when we are actually in class, are there ways that we can maybe approach how we're attending class so that it's not hurting us in the long term as far as comparing ourselves to our classmates?
Okay, so I'll take the first question. You take the second.
Okay, good.
So the first question, that's just what I'm saying. Begin applying things in other parts of your life. I use mental management and I use other life skills that I've learned through my life in all avenues of my life. And yes, if you practice those, little bits of courage, that little confidence building in something else, it absolutely will bleed over to your nose work practice. Because again, you begin in a way trusting yourself, knowing that you can go out, you'll give something a go, you're strong enough to know, and not worry as much about what I call the goo, the good opinion of others, what other people say about you. You'll make your own judgment on whether that was worth it for you. And you start to get more confident, period. And then that will apply to your nose work. I think, yeah, definitely use it in other parts of your life.
Yeah, I think even like in classes, for example, is like take a breath, right? You're all in the same boat in the classes, regardless of if somebody is doing better than you, and acknowledge that everybody has some struggles. And even sometimes, the people who are like, oh, I have no self-image issues, I'm super self-confident. Oftentimes those are actually the ones that do have some issues, but they cover that up quite nicely. So with regards to classes, you can find yourself maybe a person that you really like and say like, hey, when I'm running my dog, can you give me some positive feedback on my leash handling? Right? So the person then runs the search, and her accountability buddy says like, wow, I loved it how you reeled in the leash, you let the leash out, that was wonderful. So that you're getting positive imprints during the class. And you can also do the same thing for the other person. You could go, if you feel the class that you're in at that moment in time is not a good fit, certainly find another class or even do some privates. That may be another option as well. But I do think, like Teah said, you have to put yourself out there a little bit and not expect everything to come to you. You have to put in an effort yourself and try to be better and be a little bit more outgoing and ask for help when needed. One other thing I really love, and I harp on that all the time, is look at your videos, whether it's training videos or trial videos, and really focus on the things that went well. Chances are most things went well, even in your video. Maybe your start routine was great, and you covered the area very nicely, you called alert confidently on an inaccessible heights, and then write that down. And we have a performance journal, which works really well for that, because there's a big part where it says like, what did I do well? And then build your self-confidence in that manner as well.
So that actually works really well with our comment here of video feedback to analyze yourself.
There you go.
So how is it then, if someone is in the headspace, they're just finding out about this whole imposter syndrome thing, and they're like, ooh, I think that's me. And they've been filled with all this negative self-talk. They have very, very low self-esteem. They're convinced that both them and their dogs have all kinds of issues. How are they then able to objectively view the video without subjectifying what they're seeing and only focusing on the negative? Are there certain specific tips that you can give for people where they aren't just focusing, oh, see how the dog got tangled in that line there? I told you, I'm so bad at leash handling. Like, how can they break that cycle even in watching the videos?
Well, I'll say that I think negative self-talk is a habit. I think it's what we've perhaps grown up with or established at some time in our life, and it's become a habit. And anytime you have a habit, you can change that habit. People often will say, "This is just the way I am." I don't buy that. We all have the ability to change our habits and attitudes. We've got a couple of great, ways to do that in mental management. Silke already mentioned the performance journal as a way. Another is directive affirmations. And there's lots of other things you can do. So again, if I were a person that were in that shape, and by the way, I was in that shape prior to being 19 years old, up until the time I was 18, I would call myself a pessimistic, negative person. Not naturally, but due to upbringing. It's just what I grew up with. It's life is hard. And so when I decided to break out of that, when I moved out of the house and learned other ways to think about things, it was truly inspiring and amazing. And as I began to research it and practice being more positive, I just became more positive. And it's a habit. You can change it. And that's one thing you would work on, and you would work on it in a couple of ways. One way you could do it if you're looking at videos, because now you're biting off a lot. That's an easy way to beat yourself up. I would do that with a friend. I would do that with a friend that is helpful and knowledgeable. Maybe your nosework coach, maybe a colleague from class, somebody knows someone about that can help you to learn how to see the positive, because we put on the glasses based on our perception of the world. And then that's what we see. It's confirmation bias. It's what we believe. And so that's what we pick out to see. Just like if you buy a new car and you activate that little reticular activating system in your mind, all of a sudden you see blue Honda CRVs all over the place, because that's what you've been looking for, and you see one. Your mind filters out other stuff. So same with negative self-talk or positive self-talk. The more you begin being more positive, you begin to see that you can do things differently and respond to things differently. You can't change what's outside of you. You can respond in a different way.
And I tell you, it's not easy to switch from negative self-talk to positive self-talk. Like back to the performance, analysis. It's like, like write down 3 things that you did well. And, when you start writing it, initially you feel actually like a fraud. You're like, really? I was good at this, but can't be right. It's hard to work against that negative self-talk, but you can absolutely do it. Don't use it as an excuse. Oh, I'm never going to get better, so I'm not even going to try. It is work. It really, really is. If you really can't get out of it yourself, there's therapists out there. If you find it's not just in nose work, but maybe also in other aspects of the life, I think nowadays, going to see a therapist is very common. So, seek help from somebody who's qualified to help you outside of nose work as well.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. And then are there particular ways that maybe people could design their training? Because a lot of times we are so focused on the dog. Let's break things down to small pieces. Let's ensure they have successful repetitions. Let's build up this really strong foundation so that the dog really does understand what we're asking them to do. Are there ways that we should maybe think about how we're setting up our training to help us as handlers as well, that maybe we're forgetting about our part in all of this, that we just assume I'm just going to somehow magically pick up leash handling. I'm magically going to learn how to read my dog. I'm magically going to learn how to cover a search area. I'm suddenly going to understand how the wind is moving just by sticking my face out. like, are there ways that we can help ourselves as far as how we're designing our practice sessions to ensure that we are developing that history of success, so that it's not so easy to get bogged down in the negative self-talk? Could you guys talk about that a little bit?
I think Bob Bailey's always said, be a splitter, not a lumper, right? So, just setting up, just focusing, write it down. I think writing something down really helps me to just focus on that one thing, because otherwise, if I don't say, like, for example, okay, I'm going to work with my dog on, converging hides or something, close proximity hides. The tendency is oftentimes to oh, I'm going to do close proximity, but what if I put an elevated hide nearby and I do this, and then I work on leash handling and I put it in a really tight area, so we start to lump. So I find if I write it down, what my goal is, what my objective is, which is also part of the performance journal, write that down and then stick to it. And that will help you when you stick to it and you do well and you review your videos like, yes, I absolutely stuck to it. Then that is like a check. Hey, I did this great. And you have to repeat that. It's not just because you do it well once, just like with our dogs, doesn't mean you have that under your belt, but you need to practice that over and over again until it becomes second nature, it becomes subconscious, where you really believe, you know what, I know how to handle my dog's leash. I know, you know, what my dog looks like when he's working two hides that are close together, etc.
Mm-hmm. I think another thing you can do in your own practice is helpful is to sandwich something that's a little bit more difficult for you or your dog in between things that are easier. That's a way to feel more reinforced as you go. Like if you're setting out and you're like, wow, we have to work on elevated hides, you know, and let's say you just don't, or let's use trapping odor. Let's say you need to work on trapping odor, you know, a fairly difficult odor problem for a lot of dogs and handlers. It's where a lot of false alerts come in, obviously. If you like are forcing yourself to go out, I'm going to work on it 3 times this week and I'm going to make it happen. It's not the kind of thing that you really want to go out and do, and you're not as enthusiastic about it. You want to take care of yourself as well. So let's say you just super love doing exteriors in a new place like a park or something, you know, sandwich it, you know, one day go out and do 2 hides at your park next door that you love, and then go into your garage and work on a trapping odor problem, and then end with $5, you know, drill with odor in 3 boxes, or pairing it or something fun. So you put the thing that you're really working on and maybe struggling with a little bit in between things that are more fun and easier for you. And that can help you to feel reinforced as you do it. And I think the other thing is, in my opinion, be willing to ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you need some help, if you're struggling, see if you could speak with your instructor after class, or these days, my gosh, there's lots of online instruction. You know, there's seminars you can watch. Well, your Scent Work You at lots of places. I mean, get yourself some information, get yourself some help. You don't have to struggle it out on your own. You know, I would say that's the other thing that can help the handler to tackle some of those things.
Absolutely. And I think that's a very important thing, that we should really embrace the fact that we are in this renaissance of information and the accessibility that we have to a variety of professionals all around the globe that even, 10 years ago was not possible. So absolutely do not feel as like, well, I'm just in a little tiny area, there's no one near me. It doesn't matter anymore. Geography is not a thing. You absolutely can reach out and get the help that you need. And sometimes just having that outside perspective of, actually, you know what, you and your dog are really good. You sent me a video and you guys are really great here, 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 and here. Here's a couple of ways that you may be able to improve, but I don't think you're actually as bad as you thought. And that can be very reaffirming, particularly if it's someone that you may have just reached out for that help, but it's not someone that you know very personally, like, well, they're just saying it to be nice. We're like, no, actually, like, this person is being paid to give you this information and they're going to be very honest with you. That could be really helpful as well. So I think that you had brought up, Teah, this nice little sandwich effect. And one of our comments was, when I feel beat up, I set easy hides so my dogs are happy, and then I feel like $1,000,000. I think that that's a really good thing too, is that we can see our dogs do well, and that can help us feel better as well, which is good, because sometimes that's something I do want you guys to just touch upon while we're wrapping up this part about competitors, is, do we in nose work tend to put a little bit more weight on what we're doing because we're so worried about the effect it has on the dog? Of, I messed up the search. If it wasn't for me, my dog would have gotten that hide. If it wasn't for me, I wouldn't have called that false alert because my dog would have had a better handler. If it wasn't for me, they would be more successful. They'd be more efficient, whatever the case may be. Is that part of the issue why we're seeing this a lot in nose work, this imposter syndrome, this tendency of negative self-talk, is because of people's relationships with their dogs are so worried about breaking the dog?
Well, I think what it is we all love our dogs so much. And we know how amazingly fantastic, because I've thought about this. I've been working, with dog people for about 28 years, and this isn't just nose work. This is dogs in general. We love them so much, and we often do recognize that the dog seems to have their stuff together. And what happened was more our error. And then we feel like really bad about it, like we let them down. And I think part of it comes into what we call, the good opinion of others. Other people don't think we're a good team because I screwed up and my dog is magnificent and I know it and I want people to see it. This is important to me. So I think you just have to get realistic. I mean, like we've said before, if there are some training issues or some foundational issues for your dog, you outline those, you get yourself some help, you deal with it. If there's some issues for you as a handler, needing to learn leash handling, covering the area, understanding how odor moves, dealing with your mental game, then you get yourself some help and you deal with it. And then you know that you really are doing the best you can. And then be realistic. Again, you have a 12-year-old arthritic pug. You cannot expect them to go out and run a search area like a 4-year-old border collie is gonna. It's never gonna happen. So you have to get authentic in your communication with yourself as well. And then also remember in the end what Silke said in the beginning, which is, why did we get into this in the first place? Because we wanted to see that amazing connection and all these cool things that our dog could do. I mean, I remember when I first saw nose work and was in the very beginning classes with Amy and Jill Marie, I remember just being so amazed at what these dogs could do. We did those little Easter egg, hunts out in the grass. And, over and over again, I was just like, oh my God, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. And keep the perspective that the dog is still living with that. The dog doesn't care about the ribbons. As long as you act happy and you're good to your dog, they don't care about that. They just want to go out and search and have fun. So keep it in perspective.
And I think, initially when I first heard it, oh, my dog needs a better handler, it sounds kind of funny,
Sarcastic.
but it's very self-defeating, right? And it's that your dog loves you the way you are, right? And if you actually asked your dog, the chances are the dog would say, I love you, Mom. I want to go home with you, Mom. Everything is going to be fine. And I think that's what we, have to remember as well. Your dog loves you just the way you are, and they're just happy that you are there with them doing a fun activity. And that's the most important thing.
Absolutely. And I love this. The dogs don't feel let down. They're having fun. Absolutely. So I think that's a good thing for us to remember, is that, again, this can just turn into a real icky mental soup if we aren't careful. But there's lots of ways that I love all the different suggestions you guys are giving that we can kind of catch ourselves and then remind ourselves that we are supposed to be having a fun time with our dogs. And there's tangible things that we can do as handlers in order to ensure we're not getting into all this ickiness. But I did want to spend a little bit of time talking about our fellow colleagues. We as instructors are kind of an animal of our own because we're wearing so many hats. And then we're also trying to teach other people as well. And we're tying ourselves up sometimes in the results that they're seeing with their dogs. We want so much for our clients to do well. And then if things aren't going well, we're like, oh, well, clearly that's because of me. Or we may feel as though we need to set ourselves to a different standard, but we may not have the time to train with our dogs. Our dogs may not be the age or the temperament in order to go into competitions, as an example. There's a whole litany of things that can happen, where I think instructors really resonated a lot with that podcast episode. They're like, thank you. This is what I'm struggling with. How do I now go forth and make sure that I'm not quite so miserable? So what do you guys have as far as suggestions for your fellow colleagues, that if they are finding themselves going, you know what, I just don't think that I'm up to snuff, but they actually are? how can you communicate to them some things that they should try to do as instructors to better help themselves?
I think networking with other instructors is helpful. So, for example, here where I live, I kind of started an instructor practice group. So we set heights for each other, we bounce ideas off each other, we set specific, search areas for specific height placements, etc., so that we can actually build our own training and our own dogs, and we get a different or several different sets of eyes on our own dog, because I do think that's a biggie, right? We train other people, but oftentimes we do not have anybody to train with. Some people or some instructors, they run their own dogs in their own classes. And even most of the time I find, even if they ask for their clients or students for feedback in the class, most of the time the students, they're, I don't know, I don't want to say anything, right? So they're not often getting any feedback, even if they do run the dogs in class. And as you already addressed, the dog that they have right now may not be suitable. I do know instructors who've never competed because they just haven't had the dogs to be, in a trial. And hey, my hat goes off to them that they say, like, my dog will not enjoy it, to kind of say, I don't. I think as an instructor, if your students do well, that should reflect well on you, regardless of how well you do or not, for whatever reason. But also keep in mind, like I and Teah probably too, when I first started Nosework, a lot of my clients were behavior cases, right? So I never really expected them to compete, or it was purely an enrichment activity. And some of them went to compete and did marvelously well because they worked a lot on the foundation and they did really, really well. So again, be mindful. It is an issue, but we're all humans. So regardless of whether you're an instructor competitor or a client competitor, we're all in the same boat here. And it's, yes, we set ourselves to a much higher standard. We set ourselves to, perfection. And that's just, again, self-defeating.
Yeah. There's so many variables with that when you're dealing with people, when you're teaching people, like, there are just so many variables that come in. And one is that you cannot make your client comply with the assignments that you give them. And I saw this for many years just in normal dog training. And sometimes, like, Silke and I have both done behavior. At times I was working with people who it was literally life or death. I mean, that dog was going to have to be euthanized, or their children might be at risk because it was an aggressive dog. And I couldn't get them to comply with what I wanted them to do. And I did truly my best. So as in Nosework, it's a sport. It's an important sport. But again, nothing's going to happen really terribly detrimental if someone doesn't compete in a trial or doesn't, qualify that day. So I think what you have to do is you just have to do your best as an instructor to work on ways of speaking to people's listening. And that's part of being a really good instructor, I think, and giving them the information they need, and then trust them to take it from there and work it and do the best they can. And that's really all we can do. We can't be responsible really for how someone chooses to do that. Assuming we've taken the time to be educated, and I know certainly in NACSW, we've gotten lots of education to teach, then we're doing the best we can giving that information. And the people that really want to do it and are working on it are going to give it a go. If they're going to have problems, everybody's going to have some issues. We hopefully are there to help them and give them a stair step. But I think what Silke said about having other instructors that you can work with and talk with and give each other feedback and that kind of thing is helpful, because I don't know really, all the instructors I've known through all my life where they can say everything is a success story, because, you've got dogs with environmental issues and behavioral issues and older dogs and way young dogs and so many different things, that so many variables. So, the short answer is get in with some other people, do your best, put it out there, what you want to teach them, and then do your best to encourage them to do it.
Okay. And then for some of the feedback that I received as far as instructors were concerned, they're like, okay, clearly this resonates with me. I believe that I have this imposter syndrome thing going on. But then the thought of trying to carve out time to work on myself when I'm already hustling so much just to try to make ends meet. And I'm also extending myself to try to ensure that my clients are doing well. I'm very invested in their progress. It just seems impossible. It just seems so hard for me to undo kind of this mountain of that's kind of built up over probably years. How do I even get started without like not teaching classes for a month? Like, because I don't know how to, I don't know how to break it all down to make sure that I'm still meeting the needs of my clients, but then I also need to meet my needs, but that may mean that I have to break things down, but then I don't know how to do that with my time. Help me. So what are some of the ways that instructors who potentially are already really busy, they're already really stretched way thin, how can they incorporate some maybe small shifts or changes that could help them so this seems more attainable as opposed to, well, this is just too hard. I don't have time for this. Never mind. I'll just keep doing what I'm doing.
Well, I think like what Teah said, you have to break it down into smaller pieces. I think you have to make it a priority. And, you know, we make priority for many things. I mean, if you can be on your phone scrolling through Facebook for half an hour a day, then maybe use that time to work on your mental management, right? But even if you have like 5 minutes a day, maybe you go to bed at night and you say to yourself, hey, 3 things that I did well today, regardless of whether it was nosework related or even, you know, hey, I complimented somebody, it doesn't really matter. So start really small, but make it a habit. And then gradually kind of maybe give yourself more time, or say like you've kind of complimented yourself for 3 months on 3 things every night when you go to bed. Maybe then you're gonna say like, okay, now I'm going to work on something else. I'm gonna work on something nosework related, start routine. What is my start routine going to be? And I'm going to do it each and every time when I get my dog out and do some training. And that might just take an extra minute to do your start routine. It doesn't even take long. I know with mental management and anything it looks such a big mountain and you don't really know where to start. But when you take it, make it into smaller pieces, it's actually very, very doable. It's anything that you want to become good at. You don't start at the top of the mountain, right? You start slow. If you want to learn to play the keyboard, the piano, the guitar, you start with some chords. You start with some, little drills. You're not starting up here, but you're starting low. And it's repetition, repetition, repetition. Laugh at yourself if sometimes it doesn't go well. Give yourself permission to maybe skip a day, but then get back onto it. Remember, we all make mistakes. Sometimes life gets in the way, but keep going and keep doing it. Hold yourself accountable. Have a calendar. Check it off. Hey, today I did my 5-minute gratitude thing. Today I did 5 minutes of this. So, and as Teah mentioned earlier, have an accountability buddy. Maybe there's somebody else that is struggling and you can actually attack this whole thing together and hold each other accountable.
I think that's really it. I think the best way is whenever you're overwhelmed with anything in life, you break it down and you take one small step at a time. And you begin to get yourself used to the idea and get the habit. Like, have you ever, I mean, I've seen people like this that are amazing. Like I've been through it in my life. It's like, oh, I'm going to get in shape. I'm going to exercise, 7 days a week, and I'm going to be running a marathon in, 2 minutes and all that. Break it down, make it doable. That's how you can form a really strong habit that you can work into your routine. And like Silke said, sometimes it's just 5 minutes. And this is a common problem for dog trainers, to have the time. They're giving so much time to others, to have the time to work with their own dog and their own self. Consider, God forbid, it sounds terrible, but consider getting up 15 minutes earlier. Just don't hit the snooze. Get out of bed. You got an extra 15 minutes. I know it's a scary thought. Maybe you just take that, you go have your cup of coffee and you take 10 minutes to work with your dog. You don't try to do it all. You do an exercise or two, and you get to check off on your list that you did it that day, or that might be whatever it is you're working on in your life, your exercise, your whatever. Start small, make it a habit. And as it starts to get more comfortable, then you're going to bring more in. The other thing is, do your best to set it up so it's easy. If every time you're going to do, say, I was practicing containers for a while. Well, you know what? I loaded my boxes. I put them in a big, I loaded my toolboxes, my Sterilite and my ORT boxes, and I put them in a big, what do you call it? It's like a big Tupperware. I can't think of what, big plastic container, sealed. They were loaded, ready to go. I had my boxes set up, organized on a shelf that I could grab in the garage, and the others, I had a wagon to pull them out so I made it easy for myself, because what I found is I'd spend 10 minutes, 15 minutes setting everything up. And then I'm like, oh shoot, I need to go make that client call, set up your life. Like right now I'm working on some exercise. So, there sits the rowing machine in our family room, and it's not all set up in the corner. It's out. It's ready to go. I can step on it. Make it easy in your life so that you can just put in maybe 10 minutes or 15 minutes and you've started working on something, because there's an immediate release, I find, emotionally and internally, as you go, hey, I've started this. You're no longer arguing with yourself of, I need to do it. I got to do it. Same with organizing your office, that kind of thing. It's like, okay, I'm just going to do the left-hand corner of my desk today. That's all I'm going to work on. I'm not going to try to clean the entire, so break it down. And the important thing is get started. As you begin to get started, then the energy changes. You feel better about it. You start doing more, and you go from there.
Yeah,
perfect.
And it takes time. It does take time. And a really, really good book is Atomic Habits by James Clear. If you want to change some habits or start some new habits, the book is excellent. It gives you various ways of how you can begin a new habit. Sandwiching is one of them, or attaching it to another activity that you're already doing. It's a very, very good book.
I love that book. I've read it several times. So much good information in it.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we'll make sure there's a link for that inside the chat as well. I'm sorry, Teah, go ahead.
Just one other thing I think we all do. It's a way to, in a way, put off getting to it, is you can also gather information and analyze and think about things forever. You want to have enough information to get started, because you need to know what you're doing. And something a trainer told me many years ago, it's like 30 years ago when I was just starting, he said, Teah, quit watching seminars, get off your couch, go train your dogs, and then go train every neighbor in your neighborhood's dogs if you want to learn how to be a dog trainer. Get off the couch, quit studying. You've studied enough.
Yes.
And so that's a thing too. Sometimes we'll just like, well, I'm going to think about it. I'm going to, organize how I'm going to do this. I worked with somebody once who spent so much time organizing how she was going to organize that I ended up doing half of her work, because she was still organizing what she was going to do today. And meanwhile, the work had to be done. So sometimes it's like, okay, I've gotten the basic information. I can at least get started. Mm-hmm. And then I noticed that someone wrote a very good note there that says, after being a trainer for over 30 years, I cling to the advice of John Rogerson: you will burn out if you don't train your own dog. Mm-hmm. And it also goes for, take care of yourself. You just have to prioritize some time for your own life. You have to make it a priority so that you can work with your own dog and do some things that support you.
Perfect. So we did have one more comment. It must be frustrating for an instructor when a client asks for help, doesn't put in the work, and wonders why the issue isn't improving. So yes, that is definitely something that we encounter. But to kind of wrap up this whole idea, this whole conversation that we're having, is there a way that maybe as instructors we can view that differently, as opposed to making it just about us? of like, oh, I'm just not reaching them or whatever. Is there something that we can do to be like, okay, I did my best. I wasn't reaching them. I can give them these other resources to potentially go use, and then have it not be quite such a hit to us personally. Is there a way that we, again, I just like to give people tangible things they can do instead of us all going, yes, that's so frustrating. Like, okay, but there should be something we could do for it. So what are some of the suggestions that you have?
Well, I think you just answered your own question. What you say. I think you do everything you can do. You put out there what information you can have. And then if you don't see any changes and the person isn't improving at all, you do give them other resources. Because the reality of life is that different people speak to different people's listening. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything about you and your knowledge. I might say something one way, Silke might say it another, someone else might say it another, and the person hears it from that person. I can't tell you how many times I worked with people over and over again. Then I'd say, hey, why don't you read this book from Patricia McConnell on leash handling? Read what she has to say. They would come back and parrot to me my exact way that I taught them. And they say, you know what Patricia said? She said you should do it this way. It's the most amazing thing. And I think, yeah, whatever she said, she spoke to their listening. So in the end, that person has been supported in doing what they want to do, which is what I want to see for them. So I think you do give people other resources. It's amazing how that works.
And I love the way that I'm sorry, go ahead. Silke.
I don't see it as a failure for yourself. I don't think, oh, I'm a failure because I couldn't impart the information. It's more like I'm actually I'm doing the right thing by maybe sending them other resources or sending them to somebody else, because that will be helping my client. So if you spin it around that way, it's a more positive way. Like, oh, I'm a failure, I couldn't train this person. It's just like, no, I'm actually giving them the resources to succeed.
Exactly. Where you're viewing it, it's actually something that's very impressive for you to be able to own the fact, I'm trying to say to this person in every which way that I know how, do ABC, and they are hearing gobbledygook. But if I can give them the resource of Patricia McConnell and suddenly ABC makes perfect sense, that is should be an empowering thing for you, that you were confident enough in yourself to say, you know what, I recognize that we're not meshing for whatever reason, but this other person may be able to help you, and I want to help you make sure that you're reaching your goal, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be my words. It doesn't have to be through me. I want to be part of that journey. And like you said before, it can be a village. It doesn't have to be a village of one. You don't just have to get everything from me, because I'm also not all knowing. So I think that could be really helpful for people, is making it so that, yes, we are responsible for our clients. We do have a lot of duty, but there's lots of really wonderful resources out there, and it could take some of the pressure off. I think that can also help avoid some of the burnout and some of the bad decisions that we may make as instructors. We're trying to hoard onto our clients who are so worried that they're so going to abandon us one day and then we're not going to have a living. Instead, to be like, no, we can partner with our colleagues and our friends. And the more that all of us can work together, the better, because that elevates everything and also elevates ourselves. And if we do need to tap out for a little, be like, I overstretched myself, I need a break, we can then tell them to go somewhere else. So go ahead.
Yeah. But I think it's a self-confidence thing too, right? I mean, sometimes if my my self-worth is tied to my students, I have a little bit of a problem there, right? So I need to be able to let them go, and regardless how they do, and not let that influence my self-worth. But I think so many of us, we identify ourselves through the successes of other people, but again, that's not the important thing, right? So feeling comfortable in yourself and having that self-image to be comfortable in your own skin, admit your own shortcomings, kind of celebrate your successes. I think that's really important, and don't make it dependent on anybody else.
Perfect. Well, I want to thank you both so very much. I know how incredibly busy you are, and we're already over time. But as we are wrapping up, because we had such great participation from our live attendees, we already see some additional questions. I may want to invite you both back if you're like, yes, I would want to do this again, as opposed to, no, we never want to do this ever again. Leave us alone. So as we're wrapping up, I'd love for you both to promote anything that you have going on, how people may be able to learn more about what you do. So feel free to talk about anything that you have coming up, because we definitely do want people to continue learning from both of you. So Ms. Teah, do you have any kind of seminars or any kind of events coming up, particularly about mental management?
Yeah, I do. I also partner with Heather Sumlin, who is Lanny's daughter, and Barbara Courier. And we've got Mental Mastery for Dog Handlers, four-part series coming up starting September 10th, once a week for 4 weeks. And that's all available through Heather's website, which is sumlinsolutions.com. And it's Mental Mastery for Dog Handlers. And it just so happens that on Monday, this coming Monday, we're doing a little preview. So people that have not had any, they haven't learned anything about mental management, they're not sure what it's about, we're doing a little free preview. Right now, that's on my Facebook, Teah Anders. And you can also go to Heather's website, sumlinsolutions.com, and you can just sign up for the little free, I think we're going to talk probably, I don't know, half an hour, 45 minutes, and give people just some information about what mental management is about. So
Perfect.
that's what I've got coming up just immediately.
Awesome. And we'll make sure that we have links for all this stuff for everybody. That will be in the replay as well. And Miss Silke, do you have anything you want to promote? We are delighted. We actually have you coming for a webinar if you want to talk about that.
There you go. So I'm going to be doing a webinar for actually Diana and Sandwich University, and we're calling it Nerves Poisoning, the Fun Mental Management Techniques for Nervous Competitors. And we're doing that on September the 18th at 4:30. I think Pacific time. There's probably going to be more mental management stuff coming up in the near future, but nothing fixed yet. So I don't really want to talk about it at this moment in time. But yeah, we're available for nose work. If you want to get in touch with me, contact at hero-dog.com for mental management, for nose work. And I also have a Patreon channel that you can check out. Hero Canines is the Patreon channel, and I'm always happy to see people there as well.
Perfect. Well, ladies, I appreciate you both so very much for sharing all of your insights and expertise today, and also for everything that you do for the sniffing community. We are very grateful for both of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Diana.
For having us. It was awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, everyone, please make certain that you give a cookie to your puppies for us. They are so awesome. They're like, oh, we had to wait for you in front of a freaking computer screen again. We thought you only did this for webinars. What is this? Play with me. So go play with your puppies and give them some cookies and apologize for us, but we're all helping you be better people. All right, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. We love seeing you. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.